More than 4 billion years ago, Earth was covered by vast oceans that shaped the planet long before humans appeared. These ancient waters witnessed the first signs of life, the rise of strange creatures, and countless changes that transformed the world over millions of years. Gigantic predators, armored fish, enormous reptiles, and mysterious animals lived, hunted, and disappeared beneath the waves as continents shifted and climates changed. From the earliest seas to the oceans that existed before modern marine life. This is the complete history of Earth's remarkable prehistoric waters and the incredible creatures they once supported. Earth formed about 4,540 million years ago from dust, rock and gas that surrounded the young sun. Small pieces of material moved around the early solar system and slowly joined together because of gravity. As more material gathered, the growing planet became larger and heavier. Every collision released enormous amounts of heat. The pressure inside the young Earth also increased as its mass grew. Radioactive elements inside the planet produced even more heat. Because of these different sources of heat, much of the early Earth became extremely hot. Large areas of its surface were covered by molten rock instead of the solid land that exists today. During this early period, the Earth looked very different from the planet that people know today. There were no oceans, no rivers, no lakes, and no living things. The surface was unstable and changed constantly. Volcanoes were active across many regions. Molten rock flowed over the land again and again. Huge impacts from space continued to strike the young planet. Some impacts were so powerful that they melted parts of the surface and threw rock high into the atmosphere. The planet slowly changed as these violent events became less common over time. As the Earth slowly lost heat to space, the outer layer began to cool. Cooling did not happen all at once. Different parts of the surface cooled at different times. Thin, solid crust formed over some regions while other places remained covered by molten rock. This early crust was not very stable. It often cracked apart because of the movement of hot material beneath it. Fresh, molten rock reached the surface through these cracks and covered older rocks. The crust continued to form, break apart, and form again many times. The early atmosphere was also very different from the air that exists today. It did not contain enough oxygen for animals or plants to survive because those forms of life had not yet appeared. Instead, the atmosphere contained large amounts of water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur gases, methane, ammonia, and other gases released from deep inside the Earth. Volcanoes played a major part in filling the atmosphere with these gases. Every volcanic eruption released more material into the air. Some gases remained in the atmosphere for long periods, while others reacted with rocks or escaped into space. Water played an important part in the history of the young Earth even before the first oceans appeared. Some water was already trapped inside minerals that became part of the growing planet. As the Earth's interior heated up, this water escaped through volcanic activity. Large clouds of water vapor entered the atmosphere. Additional water may also have reached Earth through icy objects that struck the planet during its early history. Small icy bodies and water-rich rocks added more water to the planet as they collided with the surface. Scientists continue to study exactly how much water came from inside the Earth and how much arrived from space. Evidence shows that both sources probably contributed to the total amount of water found on Earth today. For a long time, the Earth's surface remained too hot for liquid water to stay in one place. Any rain that fell quickly turned back into water vapor because of the high temperatures. Water moved continuously between the atmosphere and the hot surface. As cooling continued, the temperature slowly dropped to levels that allowed liquid water to remain on the ground for longer periods. This marked an important step in the formation of the first oceans. The atmosphere contained enormous amounts of water vapor. As temperatures became lower, this water vapor began to condense into tiny droplets. Thick clouds covered much of the planet. Rain started to fall over large areas of the Earth's surface. This rainfall did not last for a few days or even a few years. It continued for an extremely long time. Water collected in low places as more rain reached the surface. Valleys, depressions, and large basins filled with water. These growing bodies of water gradually became the first oceans. The first oceans did not immediately look like the oceans that exist today. Their water contained many dissolved minerals that came from volcanic gases and newly formed rocks. Rainwater flowed over the young crust and dissolved chemical substances from the rocks. Rivers had not fully developed as they exist today, but flowing water carried dissolved materials into the growing oceans. Every rainfall and every flow of water changed the chemical makeup of the early seas. The first seawater was probably warmer than modern seawater because the Earth still contained much more internal heat than it does today. Volcanoes continued to release heat and gases beneath the oceans. Hot water flowed through cracks in the ocean floor. These underwater volcanic areas released minerals into the surrounding water. The movement of hot water and dissolved chemicals created environments that were rich in different substances. These conditions later became important for many chemical reactions that took place in the oceans. As water gathered across the planet, the oceans covered large parts of the Earth's surface. The presence of these oceans changed the way the Earth behaved. Water absorbed heat during warm periods and released heat during cooler periods. This helped reduce some of the sharp temperature changes that affected the young planet. Clouds, rainfall, evaporation, and flowing water became parts of a continuous natural process that shaped the Earth's surface. Rain slowly wore away rocks that had recently formed. Tiny pieces of rock and dissolved minerals entered the oceans. Over long periods, layers of sediment collected on the ocean floor. These sediments recorded many events that happened during the Earth's earliest history. Today, scientists study very old rocks to understand how the first oceans formed and how the environment changed over time. Although many of the oldest rocks have been altered by heat and pressure, some still preserve valuable information about the conditions that existed billions of years ago. The formation of the oceans also changed the atmosphere. As rain dissolved carbon dioxide from the air, some of this gas entered the seawater. Chemical reactions between seawater and rocks removed additional carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Some carbon became trapped inside minerals that settled onto the ocean floor. This gradual process slowly reduced the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Even though volcanic eruptions continued to release more carbon dioxide, natural processes also continued to remove part of it. The interaction between water and rocks created many new minerals. Some minerals formed directly from seawater. Others developed when hot water moved through cracks in the Earth's crust. These changes slowly altered the composition of both the rocks and the oceans. Chemical elements moved from one place to another through flowing water, volcanic activity, and reactions inside the crust. Every stage of this process helped shape the planet into a more stable world. The ocean floor during this early time was very active. New crust formed as molten rock reached the surface beneath the water. Older crust moved away from these areas and was eventually returned to the Earth's interior. This movement recycled rocks and minerals over long periods. The continual creation and destruction of crust affected the shape of the ocean basins and influenced the movement of seawater. Hydrothermal vents became important features on parts of the ocean floor. These formed where seawater entered cracks in the crust, became heated by hot rocks below, and returned to the ocean carrying dissolved minerals. The water flowing from these vents could reach very high temperatures because of the heat inside the Earth. As the mineral-rich water mixed with colder seawater, many minerals settled out and formed deposits around the vents. These environments contained iron, sulfur, and many other chemical substances that supported complex chemical reactions. The oceans also influenced the movement of the atmosphere. As water evaporated from the surface, it rose into the air and later returned as rain. Winds carried clouds from one region to another. Rain fell over land and into the oceans. This cycle continued without stopping as long as liquid water remained on the Earth's surface. The growing water cycle became one of the most important natural systems on the planet. Lightning frequently passed through the thick clouds above the young Earth. The atmosphere was active because of volcanic gases, changing temperatures, and strong storms. Lightning supplied energy that allowed some simple chemicals to react with one another. Ultraviolet light from the sun also reached the Earth's surface because there was no protective ozone layer at that time. These energy sources caused additional chemical reactions in the atmosphere and in shallow water. The first oceans became places where many different chemical substances mixed together. Water dissolved minerals from rocks, carried volcanic gases, and transported materials from one location to another. The movement of waves and currents spread these substances through large areas. Chemical reactions took place continuously as different materials came into contact with each other. Scientists believe these reactions played an important role in preparing the conditions that later allowed the earliest forms of life to appear. The early marine environment included shallow coastal waters, deeper ocean basins, volcanic islands, underwater volcanoes, and areas where hot, mineral-rich water entered the sea. Every environment had its own chemical conditions. Some regions contained larger amounts of dissolved iron, while others contained greater amounts of sulfur or silica. The chemistry of seawater changed from place to place depending on nearby volcanic activity, rock types, and water movement. At this stage in Earth's history, the oceans did not contain fish, marine mammals, shells, coral reefs, seaweed, or any of the familiar forms of marine life. The water was shaped mainly by natural physical and chemical processes. Waves moved across the surface under the influence of wind. Tides were already affecting the oceans because of the gravitational pull of the moon, although the moon was much closer to Earth than it is today, making tidal forces stronger than those experienced in the present day. The regular movement of seawater mixed, dissolved substances and carried heat from one area to another. The ocean continued to change as volcanic activity, rainfall, rock formation, and chemical reactions shaped the young marine world. The earliest forms of life beneath the ancient seas developed from simple chemical substances that slowly became more organized over very long periods. The oceans provided water, dissolved minerals, and stable conditions that allowed these chemical reactions to continue. Tiny molecules joined together and formed larger structures that were able to hold information, carry out simple chemical activities, and eventually make copies of themselves. These important changes did not happen quickly. They took place over countless generations of chemical change until the first true living cells appeared. The earliest living cells were extremely small. They could not be seen without powerful modern microscopes. Even though they were tiny, they contained everything needed to stay alive. Even though they were tiny, they contained everything needed to stay alive. Each cell had a thin outer covering that separated it from the surrounding seawater. Inside the cell were simple materials that allowed it to grow, use energy, and reproduce. These first cells were much simpler than the cells found in plants and animals today. They did not have complex internal structures. Their simple design helped them survive in the harsh conditions of the ancient oceans. These first organisms lived only in water. The land was still empty because the surface was dry, rocky, and exposed to strong sunlight that could damage living cells. The oceans provided protection and a steady supply of dissolved chemicals that the earliest life forms needed. Small changes in temperature were easier to survive in the water than on land. The movement of ocean water also carried nutrients from one place to another, helping these tiny organisms find the materials they needed. Many of the earliest organisms obtained their energy by using chemicals that were already present in the seawater. Instead of depending on sunlight, they used natural chemical reactions involving sulfur, hydrogen, iron, and other substances released from deep inside the earth. This method of obtaining energy allowed them to live in places where sunlight could not reach. Many of these environments existed near the ocean floor, especially around underwater volcanic openings where hot water carrying dissolved minerals flowed into the sea. These underwater volcanic openings, now called hydrothermal vents, created unique environments beneath the ancient seas. Very hot water rose from beneath the Earth's crust, carrying many dissolved minerals. When this hot water mixed with the colder seawater, minerals settled out and formed tall rocky structures around the vents. Tiny living organisms gathered around these areas because the escaping chemicals provided a steady source of energy. These environments supported communities of simple life, even in complete darkness. Not every early organism lived near volcanic vents. Many floated freely in shallow coastal waters or rested on the seafloor where sunlight reached the water. Some absorbed dissolved organic substances directly through their outer covering. Others depended on chemical reactions involving materials found in the surrounding seawater. Each successful method allowed different groups of tiny organisms to spread into new parts of the ancient oceans. As these simple organisms reproduced, small natural changes sometimes appeared in their offspring. Most changes had little effect, but some helped the organisms survive better under certain conditions. Those with helpful changes often lived long enough to reproduce again, passing those useful traits to future generations. Over countless generations, these small changes slowly increased the variety of life beneath the seas. New groups of microorganisms appeared, each suited to different environments within the oceans. Some parts of the ancient seas contained more dissolved minerals than others. Some areas were warmer while others were cooler. Certain places had more sunlight, while deep waters remained permanently dark. These different conditions encouraged living organisms to develop different ways of surviving. Gradually, the earliest oceans became home to many kinds of microscopic life, even though every organism remained extremely simple by modern standards. Among the most important early organisms were bacteria. These tiny living cells became one of the most successful forms of life in Earth's history. They spread through shallow seas, deep ocean waters, muddy seafloors, rocky coastlines, and underwater volcanic regions. Different kinds of bacteria developed different ways of obtaining energy. Some depended on chemicals, while others eventually learned to use sunlight. Their ability to live under many different conditions allowed them to occupy nearly every part of the ancient marine world. Another ancient group of microorganisms, known as archaea, also appeared during these early times. Although they looked similar to bacteria, they were different in many important ways. Many archaea lived in places where temperatures were very high or where the water contained large amounts of salt or unusual chemicals. Their ability to survive under these harsh conditions showed how adaptable early life had become. Some of these ancient groups still exist today and continue living in environments similar to those found on the young Earth. One of the greatest developments in early marine life was the appearance of organisms that could capture energy from sunlight. These tiny cells contained special pigments that absorbed light. Using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, they produced food for themselves through photosynthesis. Early forms of photosynthesis were different from the process used by many modern plants, but over time a more advanced form developed. This newer process released oxygen as a natural waste product. At first, the oxygen released into the oceans did not remain in the water for long. It quickly reacted with dissolved iron and other chemicals. Large amounts of iron combined with oxygen and settled onto the sea floor, forming thick layers of iron-rich rock. These layers became part of Earth's ancient geological record. They provide important evidence that oxygen-producing microorganisms had become widespread beneath the ancient seas. As oxygen continued to be produced over very long periods, the amount of dissolved iron slowly decreased. More oxygen remained in the seawater and eventually escaped into the atmosphere. This gradual change transformed the environment of the oceans and later affected the entire planet. Many early organisms that depended on oxygen-free conditions disappeared from areas where oxygen became common. Others survived by moving into places where oxygen remained scarce, such as deep mud or underground environments beneath the sea floor. The spread of oxygen also created opportunities for new kinds of life. Some microorganisms developed ways to use oxygen to release more energy from their food. This method of obtaining energy was very efficient and supported faster growth and more active living cells. Over many generations, these organisms became increasingly successful in oxygen-rich parts of the oceans. Large groups of microorganisms often formed thin layers across the shallow sea floor. These living mats trapped tiny particles carried by the water. Layer after layer built up over long periods as new microorganisms grew on top of older ones. Minerals settled between these layers, gradually forming solid structures known today as stromatolites. These ancient formations became some of the earliest visible signs of life preserved in the fossil record. Stromatolites grew slowly in shallow coastal waters where sunlight reached the sea floor. Their layered structure recorded the steady activity of countless generations of microorganisms. Some stromatolites continued growing for many years, becoming large rounded formations rising above the surrounding seabed. Similar structures still exist in a few places today, giving scientists an opportunity to study living examples that resemble some of Earth's oldest ecosystems. Life beneath the ancient seas remained microscopic for an extremely long time. Even though no fish, shells, or seaweed yet existed, the oceans were already filled with living cells, carrying out countless chemical processes every moment. Each generation produced new cells, recycled nutrients, and helped maintain the balance of the early marine environment. These invisible communities formed the foundation upon which all later marine life would eventually develop. The prehistoric oceans changed again and again across the long history of Earth. These changes happened over an extremely long period that stretched across billions of years. The oceans were never exactly the same from one age to another because the planet itself kept changing. The movement of the land, the condition of the atmosphere, the heat inside the Earth, volcanic activity, the amount of oxygen, the level of carbon dioxide, the changing climate, and the growth of living things all affected the oceans. Every geological age brought new conditions that shaped the seas in different ways. Sometimes the oceans became warmer, while at other times they became cooler. Sometimes sea levels became much higher, while at other times large amounts of water became trapped in ice, causing sea levels to fall. These changes influenced the lives of marine organisms and also affected the land. The earliest oceans formed after the young Earth cooled enough for water vapor in the atmosphere to turn into liquid water. During the earliest part of Earth's history, the planet was still very hot. Volcanoes were active across much of the surface. They released huge amounts of gases into the atmosphere. Water vapor was one of the most important gases that escaped from these volcanoes. As the Earth slowly cooled, thick clouds formed in the sky. Rain fell for very long periods. The rainwater collected in low areas of the surface. Over time, these growing bodies of water became the first oceans. These first oceans were very different from the oceans that exist today. The water contained many dissolved minerals that came from volcanic rocks. The atmosphere also lacked the amount of oxygen found today. Instead, it contained much larger amounts of gases, such as carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and water vapor. Since there was very little oxygen, the oceans also had very little dissolved oxygen. This created conditions that could only support the earliest forms of life that did not depend on oxygen. The young oceans were also affected by frequent volcanic eruptions. Underwater volcanoes released hot water filled with minerals into the sea. These underwater openings became places where chemicals mixed with seawater. Many scientists believe that such places may have helped support some of the earliest living organisms. Small microorganisms slowly spread through the ancient seas, feeding on chemicals and later using sunlight to make food. As time passed, the earliest living organisms began changing the oceans themselves. Tiny organisms known as cyanobacteria use sunlight to produce energy. During this process, they released oxygen into the water. At first, this oxygen reacted with large amounts of dissolved iron that existed in the oceans. Iron combined with oxygen and settled onto the seafloor. Thick layers of iron-rich rock slowly formed over many millions of years. Only after much of this dissolved iron had reacted could oxygen begin building up in the oceans and eventually in the atmosphere. As oxygen slowly increased, marine environments also changed. New kinds of organisms appeared that could use oxygen to release energy from food. These organisms had more efficient ways of living and growing. This allowed life in the oceans to become more varied. Small cells eventually joined together to form larger and more complex organisms. These changes took place slowly over countless generations. During the age known as the Archean, much of the Earth's surface was covered by water. The continents were much smaller than they are today. Large areas of volcanic islands rose above the sea. The oceans surrounded these early pieces of land. Waves and rain slowly wore down rocks, carrying minerals into the sea. Rivers also carried materials from the land into coastal waters. These minerals became important nutrients for living organisms. During the following age, called the Proterozoic, oxygen continued increasing in both the oceans and the atmosphere. Marine life slowly became more diverse. Tiny organisms covered large areas of shallow seas. Soft-bodied living things began appearing in greater numbers. Toward the later part of this age, groups of larger organisms lived on the seafloor. Many lacked hard shells or bones. Their bodies were soft and simple, yet they represented an important step in the development of more complex marine life. The shape of the oceans also changed as pieces of the Earth's crust slowly moved. These movements happened because of heat deep inside the Earth. Large sections of the crust drifted across the surface over very long periods. Sometimes they came together to form larger landmasses. At other times they separated again. As the continents moved, the oceans changed shape, size, and depth. When continents joined together, they often formed large supercontinents. Vast oceans surrounded these giant landmasses. New coastlines developed while older coastlines disappeared. Shallow inland seas sometimes formed when seawater spread across low parts of the continents. These shallow waters became rich environments where many marine organisms lived. When the continents later broke apart, new oceans slowly opened. Molten rock rose from beneath the Earth's crust along long underwater ridges. As new crust formed, older crust moved away. This process slowly widened ocean basins. New coastlines developed along the separating continents. Marine life gradually spread into these expanding seas. During the early part of the Paleozoic era, the ocean supported an increasing variety of life. Many organisms developed hard shells, making them easier to preserve as fossils. Trilobites crawled across the seafloor. Brachiopods attached themselves to hard surfaces. Mollusks spread into many marine environments. Early relatives of modern corals built reef communities in warm, shallow seas. Sponges filtered tiny food particles from the water. Worms dug through soft mud at the bottom of the oceans. The seas during this period often covered large parts of the continents. Warm, shallow waters stretched across many regions. Sunlight easily reached the seafloor in these areas, allowing algae and other simple organisms to grow well. Many animals depended on these food sources. The shallow seas became crowded with different kinds of marine life. Fish also began appearing in greater numbers during the Paleozoic era. The earliest fish lacked jaws. They fed by filtering tiny food particles from the water or by feeding on material lying on the seafloor. Later, fish with jaws evolved. These new fish could catch larger prey and eat different kinds of food. Their appearance changed the balance of life within the oceans. Marine plants and tiny floating organisms also increased. Plankton drifted through the upper layers of the sea. These small organisms became an important source of food for many animals. Larger predators depended on smaller fish, while smaller fish depended on plankton. This created increasingly complex feeding relationships throughout the oceans. Coral reefs expanded across many shallow tropical seas. These reefs were built by tiny animals living together in large groups. Over time, they created rocky structures that provided homes for many different organisms. Fish, shellfish, worms, and many other creatures found shelter among these reef systems. Reefs became some of the richest marine environments of the Paleozoic seas. The climate also affected ocean conditions during different geological ages. At times, the Earth experienced warmer global temperatures. During these periods, little ice existed near the poles. As a result, sea levels remained high. Water spread across low coastal lands, creating broad, shallow seas. Marine habitats expanded, allowing many organisms to spread into new areas. At other times, the Earth entered colder periods. Large ice sheets formed near the poles. Huge amounts of water became locked inside glaciers. Sea levels dropped because less liquid water remained in the oceans. Coastlines moved farther outward. Some shallow seas disappeared completely. Marine organisms living in these areas either adapted, moved elsewhere, or became extinct. Ocean currents also changed throughout geological history. Currents moved warm and cold water across different regions of the oceans. They carried nutrients, oxygen, and heat over great distances. The movement of continents affected the paths followed by these currents. As ocean passages opened or closed, the flow of water changed. This influenced local climates as well as marine ecosystems. During the later Paleozoic era, forests spread across the land while marine life continued changing beneath the sea. Sharks became more common. Crinoids covered parts of the seafloor. Ammonoids developed into successful swimming animals. Large reef systems expanded in suitable regions. New fish groups appeared with stronger jaws and improved swimming abilities. Some marine organisms developed stronger shells to protect themselves from predators. Others became faster swimmers. Different feeding methods appeared. Some animals filtered tiny particles from seawater. Others hunted active prey. Some fed on dead organisms lying on the ocean floor. Each way of feeding allowed different species to survive within the changing marine environments. Toward the end of the Paleozoic era, one of the largest extinction events in Earth's history occurred. Many marine species disappeared from the oceans. Reef communities suffered severe losses. Numerous shellfish, trilobites, and many other groups became extinct. Changes in ocean temperature, oxygen levels, volcanic activity, and climate all contributed to this major loss of life. After this difficult period, the Mesozoic era began. Marine life slowly recovered. New groups appeared and spread across the oceans. Reptiles entered marine environments and evolved into successful swimmers. Some developed long necks while others had streamlined bodies. Different groups occupied different parts of the oceans according to their feeding habits and body shapes. Coral reefs recovered during the Mesozoic era and once again became important habitats. New reef-building organisms expanded across warm, shallow seas. Fish continued evolving into many different forms. Sharks remained important predators. Shellfish became abundant. Ammonites spread through many marine regions and became one of the most successful groups of ocean animals. The continents continued moving during this era. The giant supercontinent known as Pangaea slowly broke apart. As the land separated, new oceans formed between the continents. Coastlines became longer, new shallow seas developed. These fresh marine habitats allowed many species to spread into different environments. Sea levels rose during much of the Mesozoic era because warmer conditions limited the growth of large ice sheets. Vast shallow seas covered many continental regions. These warm waters supported rich communities of marine life. Tiny plankton flourished near the surface, providing food for fish and many larger animals. The chemistry of seawater also continued changing. Rivers carried minerals into the oceans from weathered rocks. Volcanic eruptions added chemicals from deep inside the earth. Marine organisms removed certain minerals from seawater to build shells and skeletons. As these organisms died, their remains settled onto the seafloor. Thick layers of limestone and other sediments gradually formed over time. The seafloor itself changed continuously. New crust formed along underwater ridges, while older crust slowly sank back into the Earth's interior at deep ocean trenches. This constant recycling reshaped the ocean basins. Some areas became deeper, while others became shallower. Volcanic islands appeared and later disappeared beneath the waves. The amount of oxygen in different parts of the oceans also changed during various geological ages. Some deep waters contained very little oxygen. These low oxygen areas made it difficult for many marine animals to survive. Certain microorganisms could live under these conditions, while many larger animals could not. Changes in ocean circulation sometimes increased or reduced these oxygen-poor regions. Marine sediments slowly recorded the history of these changing oceans. Tiny shells, plant remains, volcanic ash, mud, sand and minerals settled layer upon layer across the seafloor. Each new layer preserved information about the environment at the time it formed. Scientists study these layers today to understand ancient climates, ocean temperatures, sea levels, and marine life. The oceans also experienced changes in salt content during different geological ages. Rivers continuously carried dissolved minerals from rocks into the sea. Water evaporated from the ocean surface but left the salt behind. Different rates of evaporation, rainfall, and fresh water flowing from rivers caused local differences in salt levels. Many marine organisms adapted to the conditions in which they lived. Large storms also influenced prehistoric oceans. Strong winds mixed surface waters with deeper layers. This movement brought nutrients upward from the deep sea. Tiny plant-like organisms used these nutrients to grow. Their growth supported fish and many other marine animals. Storms also shaped coastlines by moving sand and breaking apart rocks. Tides continued affecting coastal regions throughout Earth's history. The pull of the moon caused seawater to rise and fall. Tides carried nutrients into shallow coastal environments. Many organisms depended on these regular changes. Mudflats, lagoons, estuaries, and shallow coastal waters became important habitats for countless marine species. During the later part of the Mesozoic era, flowering plants spread across the land. Rivers carried new kinds of plant material into the oceans. Coastal ecosystems responded to these changes. Marine organisms fed on organic matter washing into the sea. Different food sources helped support diverse communities near river mouths. Marine reptiles reached their greatest variety during much of the Mesozoic era. Some hunted fish near the surface, others searched deeper waters. Large predators fed on smaller marine reptiles, fish, and shellfish. At the same time, many smaller animals continued living along the seafloor or drifting in open water. Tiny plankton became increasingly important during this period. Certain plankton species developed shells made from calcium carbonate. After death, their shells settled onto the ocean floor. Over millions of years, these remains built thick layers of chalk and limestone. Many famous rock formations seen today began forming from these tiny marine organisms. Toward the end of the Mesozoic era, another major extinction event changed the oceans. Many marine reptiles disappeared. Ammonites became extinct. Numerous plankton species also vanished. Dust in the atmosphere, changes in sunlight, wildfires, volcanic activity, and other environmental changes affected marine food supplies. Many ocean ecosystems experienced major disruption. The following Cenozoic era saw another period of recovery. Mammals entered marine environments and eventually evolved into whales, dolphins, seals, and sea cows. Modern fish groups expanded. Coral reefs continued growing in suitable tropical waters. Seagrasses spread through shallow coastal regions, providing food and shelter for many animals. Ocean temperatures during the Cenozoic changed several times. Some periods remained warm while later ages became cooler. Antarctica gradually became covered with large ice sheets. Ice also expanded across Greenland. During colder periods, glaciers stored huge amounts of water. Sea levels dropped. During warmer intervals, melting ice returned water to the oceans and sea levels rose again. The opening and closing of ocean passages also affected global ocean circulation. As continents drifted into new positions, currents changed direction. Some regions received warmer water, while others received colder water. These shifts influenced rainfall, temperatures, and marine ecosystems around the world. Marine mammals became important members of ocean communities. Early whales still possessed some features inherited from land ancestors. Over time, their bodies changed to suit life in water. Their legs disappeared while their tails became powerful swimming structures. Their nostrils gradually shifted toward the tops of their heads, allowing easier breathing at the surface. Fish continued evolving throughout the Cenozoic. Some adapted to deep ocean conditions where sunlight never reached. Others remained in shallow coastal waters. Different body shapes, feeding methods, and behaviors allowed them to occupy many different habitats. Sharks also continued changing. Different species specialized in feeding on fish, seals, shellfish, or other prey. Some remained near coastlines while others lived far from land in the open ocean. Large sharks occupied the highest levels of marine food chains during various periods. One of the most famous prehistoric sharks, Megalodon, lived during part of the Cenozoic era. It inhabited warm seas around much of the world. It hunted large marine mammals and other prey. Changes in ocean temperatures, sea levels, prey availability, and competition gradually affected its survival. As climates cooled and marine ecosystems changed, Megalodon eventually became extinct. Deep ocean environments also changed during geological history. The deep sea remained dark throughout all ages, yet conditions there were not completely unchanged. Ocean circulation influenced how much oxygen reached deep waters. Organic material sinking from surface waters provided food for deep-sea organisms. Volcanic activity along the seafloor created hydrothermal vents that supported unique living communities. The amount of carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater changed across different geological ages. Higher amounts of carbon dioxide affected ocean chemistry. This influenced the ability of some marine organisms to build shells and skeletons. Long-term changes in volcanic activity, weathering of rocks, and biological activity all helped regulate these chemical conditions. Meteor impacts also influenced the oceans at certain times. Large impacts produced enormous waves and disturbed marine ecosystems over wide areas. Dust thrown into the atmosphere reduced sunlight, reaching the Earth's surface. This affected tiny photosynthetic organisms that formed the base of many marine food chains. As these organisms declined, larger animals also faced food shortages. Earthquakes beneath the oceans reshaped parts of the seafloor. During every geological age, underwater landslides occurred when unstable sediments collapsed. These events sometimes generated giant waves that traveled across the oceans. Volcanic islands formed where magma reached the surface beneath the sea. Some islands grew large enough to support plants and animals before later sinking beneath the water. Sediments carried by rivers constantly reshaped coastlines. Deltas expanded where rivers entered the sea. Sandbars formed through wave action. Coastal wetlands developed in low-lying regions. These environments provided valuable habitats for fish, shellfish, and many other marine organisms. Throughout prehistoric time, the oceans remained closely connected with the atmosphere. Heat moved between air and water. Gases passed from the atmosphere into the oceans and back again. Changes in one system influenced the other. As atmospheric oxygen increased, ocean oxygen also changed. As carbon dioxide levels shifted, ocean chemistry responded. Life itself became one of the strongest forces changing the oceans. Tiny microorganisms produced oxygen. Coral animals built reefs. Shell-producing organisms removed minerals from seawater. Marine plants released oxygen and absorbed carbon dioxide. large animals stirred sediments while feeding. Burrowing organisms mixed mud on the seafloor. Every generation of living things slowly altered the marine environment around them. The prehistoric oceans therefore never remained fixed during Earth's long geological history. Every geological age introduced new climates, new coastlines, new ocean basins, new currents, new marine habitats, new living organisms, new chemical conditions, and new environmental challenges. From the earliest mineral-rich seas with almost no oxygen, to the later oceans filled with fish, reefs, marine reptiles, sharks, whales, shellfish, plankton, and countless other forms of life, the oceans continued changing through the slow processes of geology, climate, chemistry, and biological activity that shaped the marine world across billions of years. Earth was still a very young planet when the first simple sea creatures began to appear. The oceans had already existed for a very long time before animals became part of them. During those early times, the seas were filled with tiny living things that could not be seen without strong tools. These tiny forms of life slowly changed the oceans by making food, releasing oxygen, and creating the basic conditions that later allowed animals to exist. The history of the first ocean ecosystems began with these very small living organisms that lived in shallow water, deep water, and near underwater volcanic areas. Their slow growth over countless generations changed the chemistry of the seas and made them better places for new forms of life. The early oceans were very different from the seas that exist today. The water contained many dissolved minerals that had come from rocks, volcanoes, and rivers. The atmosphere above the oceans also had a different mixture of gases. Oxygen was present only in very small amounts during the earliest stages of Earth's history. Tiny living organisms called bacteria and other simple microscopic life forms carried out chemical activities that slowly increased the amount of oxygen in the oceans and later in the atmosphere. This process took an extremely long time and happened little by little. As oxygen became more common, many new living things were able to survive and grow. The seafloor provided many different places where life could exist. Some areas were covered with soft mud, while others were filled with sand, broken rocks, or layers of minerals. Underwater volcanic openings released hot water rich in chemicals. Tiny organisms gathered around these places because they could use the chemicals as a source of energy. Other tiny organisms lived closer to the surface where sunlight reached the water. These living things used sunlight to make food and became the beginning of many future food chains. The first ocean ecosystems were very simple. They contained only a small number of living species compared to much later periods. Even so, these simple ecosystems were important because every larger community of sea life that appeared afterward depended on the changes made by these early living organisms. Tiny cells multiplied, spread into new places, and formed large groups. Some of these groups created sticky layers that trapped small pieces of sand and minerals. Over long periods, these layers hardened into structures that remained on the sea floor. Some of these ancient structures can still be found today as rocks that preserve evidence of early life. As time continued, some microscopic organisms developed new ways to live together. Instead of living alone, many stayed close to one another and formed colonies. Living in groups provided several advantages. The colonies could gather food more effectively, remain attached to surfaces, and survive changing conditions more easily than single cells. These colonies represented an important step toward more complex forms of life that would appear much later. The oceans constantly changed because of movements within the Earth. Volcanoes erupted beneath the water and on nearby land. New ocean floors formed while older sections slowly disappeared beneath other parts of the Earth's crust. These natural events changed the shape of the seas and created new places where life could settle. Rising and falling sea levels also changed the amount of shallow coastal water. Shallow seas often received sunlight more easily, allowing tiny organisms that depended on light to grow in large numbers. Nutrients played an important part in the growth of early ocean ecosystems. Rivers carried minerals from the land into the sea. Waves and ocean currents mixed these nutrients through the water. Tiny living organisms absorbed these materials and used them to grow. When these organisms died, their remains sank to the sea floor. There they became food for other microscopic life. This movement of nutrients through living things formed one of the earliest natural recycling systems in Earth's oceans. Many early organisms reproduced by dividing into two new cells. This simple method allowed populations to increase quickly whenever conditions became favorable. When food was plentiful and temperatures remained suitable, enormous numbers of microscopic organisms spread across large areas of the sea. At other times, changes in water chemistry or temperature reduced their numbers. Even when many organisms disappeared from one area, others often survived elsewhere and continued the long history of life. The oceans were not equally suitable for life everywhere. Some places contained more nutrients, while others had more sunlight or more stable temperatures. Certain organisms adapted to very specific conditions. Some lived near the surface, while others stayed in deeper water, where sunlight never reached. Tiny organisms living in deep water depended on chemicals rather than sunlight for energy. These different ways of surviving increased the variety of life within the oceans. As the amount of oxygen slowly increased, new possibilities became available for living organisms. Oxygen allowed cells to produce energy more efficiently. Organisms with this ability often became larger and developed more complicated internal structures. These changes did not happen suddenly. They took place through countless generations as small changes accumulated over very long periods. Each successful change gave some organisms a better chance to survive and produce offspring. Some early organisms developed stronger outer coverings that offered protection. These coverings also helped preserve their remains after death. Because of this, scientists today have more evidence for certain organisms than for others that had only soft bodies. Soft-bodied creatures usually disappeared completely after death unless special conditions buried them quickly beneath fine layers of mud. Even though many early organisms left no fossils, scientists know they existed because of chemical evidence and microscopic remains preserved inside ancient rocks. The first simple sea creatures eventually appeared after the long age dominated by microscopic life. These animals were very different from the fish, shellfish, and sea mammals that live today. Many had soft bodies without hard shells or bones. They absorbed nutrients from the surrounding water or fed on tiny organisms. Their movements were slow and many remained attached to the sea floor for most of their lives. Among the earliest simple animals were sponge-like creatures. These animals filtered water through tiny openings in their bodies. As water passed through them, they trapped microscopic food particles. This method allowed them to survive without chasing prey. Large numbers of these simple filter feeders could live close together on rocks and other solid surfaces beneath the sea. They became an important part of early ocean communities. Other early animals had simple body plans with only a few specialized parts. They lacked many of the organs found in later animals. Even so, they carried out all the basic activities needed for life. They gathered food, reproduced, responded to changes in their surroundings and repaired damaged tissues. Their bodies were built in simple ways that matched the conditions of the ancient seas. Some early sea creatures floated freely in the water. Ocean currents carried them from one place to another. This movement allowed them to spread across wide areas without needing to swim long distances. Floating organisms also became food for other creatures, helping establish the earliest food relationships within marine ecosystems. As populations of simple animals increased, interactions among different species became more common. Some organisms fed directly on microscopic life. Others fed on dead organic material that settled onto the sea floor. Still others filtered food from the water. These different feeding methods reduced direct competition for the same food sources and allowed many kinds of organisms to live together within the same environment. The seafloor gradually became covered with living communities. Microbial mats spread across soft sediments, while simple animals settled on top of or beside them. Tiny burrowing organisms slowly disturbed the sediment as they searched for food. Their activities mixed the upper layers of the sea floor and changed the movement of oxygen and nutrients through the mud. These changes created new living spaces for additional organisms. Predation was very limited during the earliest stages of animal life. Most organisms fed on tiny particles, microscopic life, or dead material. As animals slowly developed the ability to capture living prey, ocean ecosystems became more complex. New feeding relationships appeared and organisms began adapting to avoid being eaten. Some developed tougher outer coverings, while others hid within the sediment or remained attached to protected surfaces. Reproduction among the earliest sea creatures happened in several simple ways. Some released reproductive cells directly into the water where fertilization took place. Others produced offspring by growing new individuals from parts of their own bodies. These methods allowed populations to recover even after difficult environmental changes. The enormous size of the oceans also helped spread young organisms into new habitats. Water temperature strongly influenced where different species could survive. Some organisms lived only in warmer, shallow seas, while others preferred cooler waters. Ocean currents carried heat from one region to another, creating many environments across the planet. These changing conditions encouraged the gradual spread of life into areas that had previously supported very few living organisms. The chemistry of seawater continued changing as volcanic activity, weathering of rocks and biological processes affected the oceans. Minerals dissolved into the water, while other minerals formed solid deposits on the seafloor. Living organisms responded to these changes through gradual adaptation across many generations. Species unable to adjust often disappeared, while those with useful characteristics continued to reproduce. Storms also affected early marine ecosystems. Strong waves stirred sediments from the sea floor and carried nutrients into different areas. Heavy storms sometimes buried living communities beneath fresh layers of mud and sand. Although many organisms died during these events, rapid burial sometimes preserved their bodies as fossils. These fossils provide valuable evidence about the appearance and lifestyles of Earth's earliest animals. The rise of simple sea creatures marked an important stage in the history of life because animals became permanent members of ocean ecosystems. They joined the already existing communities of bacteria, algae, and other microscopic organisms that had shaped the seas for immense periods of time. Together, these living things formed stable ecosystems that continued changing as new species slowly appeared across the ancient oceans. The age of trilobites, giant sea scorpions, and the first ocean hunters covered a very long period in the history of Earth. During this time, the seas became home to many different kinds of living things. Life in the oceans became richer, more active, and more complex than it had been during earlier ages. Animals developed new body forms, new ways of finding food, and new ways of protecting themselves. The oceans stretched across large parts of the planet, and shallow seas covered many areas that are now dry land. Warm water, sunlight, and nutrients supported the growth of many forms of life. Fossils found across different continents give scientists a detailed picture of these ancient marine environments and the animals that lived in them. The beginning of this period followed a time when simple sea life had already spread through the oceans. Tiny living things floated in the water, while soft-bodied animals lived on the sea floor. Over many millions of years, new groups of animals appeared. Many of them developed hard outer shells or other firm body parts. These hard structures helped protect them from danger and also increased the chances that their remains would become fossils after they died. As a result, scientists have found many fossils from these ancient oceans, allowing them to study the history of early marine life in great detail. Among the most successful animals of this time were the trilobites. These creatures became one of the best-known animals of the ancient seas. Trilobites appeared during the early part of the Cambrian period, which began about 541 million years ago. They continued to live in the oceans for more than 270 million years, before finally disappearing during the Great Extinction at the end of the Permian period about 252 million years ago. Their long history makes them one of the longest-lasting groups of animals known from the fossil record. Trilobites belong to a large group of animals known as arthropods. This group also includes modern crabs, lobsters, shrimp, insects, spiders, and many other animals. Like their modern relatives, trilobites had a hard outer covering called an exoskeleton. This shell protected their soft bodies from injury and from attacks by predators. As the trilobite grew larger, it could not stretch its shell. Instead, it had to shed the old shell and grow a new one. Scientists have discovered many empty trilobite shells that were left behind after molting. These fossils show that trilobites changed their shells many times during their lives. The body of a trilobite was divided into three main sections. The front section held the head. The middle section contained many joined body parts that allowed movement. The back section formed the tail. The name trilobite means three lobes, because the body also had three long sections running from front to back. One section was in the middle, while one lay on each side. This body design remained successful for many millions of years. Trilobites came in many different sizes. Some species were smaller than a person's fingernail. Others grew to lengths of more than 2 feet. Their shapes also varied greatly. Some had smooth shells, while others had long spines sticking out from their bodies. Some had wide bodies that rested close to the sea floor. Others had narrower shapes that allowed them to move more easily through the water or across the seabed. The eyes of trilobites were among their most remarkable features. Many species had large compound eyes, made up of many tiny lenses. These lenses were formed from the mineral calcite, making them different from the eyes of most living animals today. Each tiny lens collected light from a different direction. Together, they helped the trilobite notice movement and changes in its surroundings. Some species had excellent vision, while others that lived in deep or muddy water had much smaller eyes or no eyes at all. Scientists believe that trilobites lived in many different marine environments. Some crawled slowly over the sea floor looking for food. Others buried themselves in soft mud with only their eyes showing above the surface. Some species may have been able to swim for short distances. Fossil evidence shows that trilobites occupied shallow coastal waters, deeper ocean areas, coral reefs, and muddy seabeds. Their diet also differed from one species to another. Some trilobites fed on tiny animals and organic material found in the mud. They searched through the sediment for bits of food left by other living things. Others may have eaten worms, small shellfish, or soft-bodied animals. Some species possibly filtered tiny food particles from the water. Their mouthparts varied according to the food they ate, allowing different species to survive in many habitats. Trilobites themselves became an important source of food for larger predators. Their hard shells offered some protection, but they could still be attacked. Many fossil shells contain bite marks, broken edges, and healed injuries. These signs show that some trilobites survived attacks and continued living after their shells healed. Other fossils show damage that likely caused death. These discoveries help scientists understand the dangers that existed in ancient oceans. Many trilobites protected themselves by rolling into a tight ball. This movement placed the hard shell on the outside while covering the softer parts underneath. The joints in their bodies allowed this action. Fossils have been found with trilobites preserved in this rolled-up position, showing that this defensive behavior was already well developed. The growth of trilobites took place through several life stages. They began as tiny young animals that hatched from eggs. As they grew, they passed through many stages, shedding their shells each time. Their body segments increased in number until they reached adulthood. Fossils of young trilobites have helped scientists understand how these animals developed throughout their lives. During the same age, many other marine animals appeared alongside trilobites. Brachiopods covered large areas of the sea floor. These shell-bearing animals attached themselves to rocks or rested on soft mud. Although they looked somewhat like clams, they belonged to a different group of animals. Brachiopods filtered tiny food particles from the water and became one of the most common animals in ancient seas. Sponges also formed important parts of marine ecosystems. They filtered water continuously, removing tiny food particles. Their bodies created places where smaller animals could hide. Some sponges developed strong skeletons made from minerals that survived as fossils. Ancient sponge communities helped support many other forms of marine life. Early corals also spread across warm, shallow seas. These animals lived together in colonies. Each tiny coral animal built a hard limestone skeleton around itself. Over long periods, many colonies formed reefs that provided shelter for fish, shellfish, worms, and countless smaller creatures. These reef environments supported rich marine communities with many different kinds of animals. Another important group included the echinoderms, early relatives of modern sea stars, sea lilies, brittle stars, and sea urchins became common during this time. Many sea lilies attached themselves to the seafloor using long stems. Their feeding arms reached into the water to capture tiny floating food particles. Large fields of sea lilies sometimes covered wide areas beneath the waves. Worms continue to play an important role in ancient marine life. Many species burrowed through the mud searching for food. Their tunnels allowed water and oxygen to enter deeper layers of sediment. Fossil burrows preserved in ancient rocks show that these animals constantly changed the seafloor as they moved and fed. Small shellfish also became abundant. Early relatives of clams, snails, and other mollusks spread into many different habitats. Their shells protected them from predators while allowing them to survive in changing conditions. Many of these animals became food for larger hunters. As marine life became more diverse, predators also became more successful. One of the earliest large hunters was Anomalocaris. This unusual animal lived during the Cambrian period. It reached lengths of about 2 feet in some species. It had large eyes, flexible swimming flaps along its sides, and grasping arms near its mouth. Scientists believe it hunted smaller marine animals, including trilobites and other soft-bodied creatures. Its circular mouth contained rows of hard plates that helped it grasp and crush food. Fossils of Anomalocaris were once misunderstood because different body parts were discovered separately. Scientists originally believed the grasping arms belonged to one animal, the mouth belonged to another, and the swimming body belonged to a third species. Only after many complete fossils were found did researchers realize they all belonged to the same remarkable predator. The seas continued changing as millions of years passed. New predators evolved with stronger jaws, sharper mouthparts, and faster movement. Marine animals responded by developing thicker shells, protective spines, burrowing behavior, and other ways to avoid becoming food. One of the most famous hunters to appear later was the giant sea scorpion. These animals belonged to a group called Eurypterids. Despite their common name, they were not true scorpions like those living on land today. They were close relatives of spiders, horseshoe crabs, and other arthropods. Most Eurypterids lived in water, although some may have been able to spend short periods outside it. Giant sea scorpions first appeared during the Ordovician period and became especially successful during the Silurian and Devonian periods. Many species were only a few inches long, but some became enormous. The largest known species reached lengths of more than 8 feet, making them among the largest arthropods that ever lived. These giant hunters possessed long bodies covered by strong outer shells. They had several pairs of walking legs and powerful front limbs used for grabbing prey. Many species also had wide paddle-like limbs that allowed effective swimming. Their tails ended in pointed structures that may have helped with balance or movement rather than delivering venom like modern land scorpions. The eyes of giant sea scorpions were positioned to give them a wide view of their surroundings. Good eyesight allowed them to detect movement in the water. Combined with their swimming ability, this made them effective predators, capable of chasing smaller animals through ancient seas. The appearance of the first fish was one of the most important events in the long history of life in the oceans. Before fish became common, the seas were already filled with many simple forms of life. Tiny living cells floated through the water, soft-bodied animals rested on the sea floor, and many small creatures searched for food among mud, sand, and rocks. The oceans had slowly become richer in life over a very long period of time. Different kinds of living things had already begun to fill many parts of the underwater world. As time passed, some animals developed new body features that helped them move more easily, find food, avoid danger, and live in places that had once been empty. Among these changing animals were the earliest fish, which slowly became one of the most successful groups of marine animals. The first fish did not look like the fish that swim in rivers, lakes, and oceans today. They were usually small and had simple body shapes. Many had no jaws, and their mouths were round openings that allowed them to feed in ways that were very different from later fish. Their bodies were often covered with hard plates or thick skin that protected them from injury. These early fish moved by bending their bodies from side to side while using small fins to help keep balance. They were not fast swimmers, but they were able to travel through the water more easily than many of the animals that lived before them. Scientists believe that the earliest fish appeared during a time that began more than 500 million years ago. During this period, the oceans covered large parts of the Earth. There were no large animals living on land, and nearly all complex life was found beneath the sea. The water held many kinds of tiny floating life. Small shell-covered animals, worm-like creatures, early relatives of starfish, strange animals with jointed bodies, and many other forms of marine life. Every part of the ocean contained living things that depended on one another for food and survival. The bodies of the first fish showed important changes that had taken many millions of years to develop. One of the greatest changes was the growth of a backbone. The backbone gave support to the body and helped the animal move with greater control. Strong muscles attached to this backbone allowed early fish to swim with more steady movements. This made it easier to travel through the water while looking for food or escaping from danger. Another important feature was the development of a head that protected the brain and important sense organs. The brain slowly became better at receiving information from the surroundings. Early fish had eyes that could detect light and movement in the water. They also had organs that helped them sense changes around them. These abilities increased their chances of staying alive because they could react more quickly to nearby animals and changing conditions. Many of the earliest fish had no jaws. Instead of biting food, they often sucked in small food particles or soft animals. Some searched through mud on the sea floor, while others fed on tiny living things floating in the water. This simple feeding method allowed them to survive in many places where food was available. Their bodies were well suited to slow movement near the bottom of the sea, where they spent much of their time. The seas during this period were becoming more active with life. Tiny plants floating near the surface used sunlight to make food. These small plants released oxygen into the water, helping many other living things survive. Tiny animals fed on these plants, while larger animals fed on the smaller ones. As each group depended on another, the ocean slowly became filled with many different feeding habits and ways of life. The seafloor was also changing. Layers of mud, sand, and broken shells collected over long periods. Many animals lived inside these soft layers or crawled across them looking for food. Hard rocks provided places where some animals could attach themselves. Small reefs created by simple sea animals offered shelter for many tiny creatures. These underwater places became homes for growing numbers of marine species. The appearance of fish added a new kind of movement to the oceans. Earlier animals often remained close to one place or moved slowly. Fish could travel farther without depending on ocean currents alone. They explored open water, searched for food over larger areas, and entered places that had fewer living animals. This wider movement helped spread different kinds of life across many marine environments. Over many generations, the bodies of fish continued to change. Some developed stronger protective plates around the head and front part of the body. These hard coverings helped protect them from attacks by large sea hunters. Other parts of the body remained more flexible so they could continue swimming without losing movement. This balance between protection and movement became an important part of their survival. Inside their bodies, important organs also became more developed. Their hearts pumped blood through their bodies, carrying oxygen and nutrients to different tissues. Their gills removed oxygen from the water as it passed across thin surfaces inside the body. This allowed fish to remain underwater throughout their entire lives. Their bodies became better at using the oxygen found in seawater, making them active members of ocean life. As fish became more common, many other marine animals also continued to change. Animals with shells appeared in many different forms. Some buried themselves in the sea floor, while others rested on rocks. Soft-bodied animals spread across shallow waters. Early relatives of modern sea stars slowly moved across the bottom searching for food. Coral-like animals formed larger groups that created new underwater homes for many smaller creatures. Large animals that hunted other sea life also lived during this period. Some had long bodies with many legs, while others had wide heads and powerful mouth parts. These hunters searched for smaller animals, hiding among rocks and mud. Early fish had to avoid these dangers if they wanted to survive. Their growing ability to sense movement and swim away became one of their greatest strengths. The oceans themselves were not always peaceful. Storms disturbed shallow waters, moving sand and breaking apart underwater homes. Changes in sea level covered some areas while exposing others. Volcanoes beneath the oceans sometimes released heat and minerals into the water. These natural events changed the places where marine life could survive. Animals that could adjust to changing conditions often lived longer and produced more young. The growth of marine life depended greatly on the health of the oceans. Clean water rich in oxygen supported many different species. Sunlight reached shallow seas, allowing tiny plants to grow in great numbers. These plants became the beginning of many food chains that supported larger animals. Areas with rich plant life usually contained many different kinds of marine animals living together. As more fish appeared, different body shapes slowly developed. Some had longer bodies suited for steady swimming. Others remained short and wide, staying close to the sea floor. Small fins became more useful for turning, stopping, and keeping balance. Although these fins were simple, they represented important steps in the long history of fish development. The skin of early fish also changed over time. Some developed tiny hard scales beneath the surface that added extra protection. Others kept thick skin covered with slimy material that reduced damage while moving through the water. These body coverings helped protect them from small injuries caused by rocks, rough seafloors, or attacks from other animals. Reproduction was another important part of the success of early fish. Many released eggs into the water, where they were fertilized. Large numbers of eggs increased the chance that at least some young fish would survive. Tiny young fish faced many dangers from the moment they hatched. Many became food for larger animals, while others died because of changing water conditions. Those that survived continued growing until they reached adulthood. Young fish often lived in different places from adults. Shallow waters provided shelter and food for many small fish. As they grew larger, they moved into deeper parts of the sea, where more space and food were available. This movement between different underwater environments helped reduce competition for food among fish of different ages. The increase in fish numbers also influenced other marine animals. Hunters found a new source of food, while small sea creatures faced new dangers from fish searching for meals. At the same time, fish helped control the numbers of tiny animals they fed upon. These natural relationships slowly shaped the balance of life beneath the sea. Many early fish lived near coastlines where sunlight reached the bottom and food was plentiful. Rivers carried minerals into these shallow seas, supporting the growth of tiny plants. These rich waters became important places where marine life expanded. Different kinds of fish gradually spread into nearby regions, filling many underwater habitats. Scientists have learned about these ancient fish mainly through fossils. Hard body parts, such as protective plates, scales and bones, were buried in mud after the animals died. Over many millions of years, these remains became part of solid rock. Today, people carefully remove these fossils from rock layers to study the appearance and growth of the earliest fish. Each discovery provides new information about how marine life changed during this distant part of Earth's history. The fossil record shows that many early fish species lived at the same time. Some survived for long periods, while others disappeared as ocean conditions changed. new species slowly appeared as small changes accumulated over countless generations. This steady process increased the variety of marine life found throughout the ancient oceans. The oceans continued to become more crowded with living things. Small swimming animals filled the open water, while bottom-dwelling creatures remained busy searching for food across the sea floor. Plants, animals, hunters, and scavengers all formed parts of growing underwater communities that became richer with each passing age. The evolution of sharks and other powerful predators is a very long story that stretches across a huge part of the history of life on Earth. It began in ancient seas that looked very different from the oceans that exist today. The water covered large parts of the planet, and countless living things slowly developed over long periods of time. Among these living things were the early ancestors of sharks. These animals were not as large or as powerful as many sharks that appeared much later, but they carried important features that would remain part of the shark family for hundreds of millions of years. Their bodies slowly changed as new generations were born, lived, and reproduced. Over time, natural changes allowed some sharks to survive more successfully than others. Those successful features were passed on to later generations, leading to the wide variety of sharks that eventually lived in the oceans. The earliest ancestors of sharks appeared during a time when fish were becoming more common in the seas. Before that period, the oceans were filled with many simple forms of life. As living things became more complex, fish with different body structures began to appear. Some developed hard bones throughout their bodies, while others developed skeletons made mostly of cartilage. Cartilage is a strong but flexible material that is lighter than bone. This body structure became one of the main features of sharks. A lighter skeleton helped many sharks move through the water with less effort. It also allowed them to make quick movements while searching for food or avoiding danger. The earliest sharks were usually much smaller than many of the well-known sharks of later times. Some were only about the length of a person's arm. Their teeth were also different from those of many modern sharks. Instead of having large cutting teeth, many early sharks had smaller teeth that were useful for catching small animals. Their food included tiny fish, worms, shell-covered animals, and other small creatures living near the seafloor or swimming in open water. The oceans during those early times contained many different forms of life. There were animals with hard shells, strange fish with heavy body armor, soft-bodied sea creatures, and many kinds of plants that lived underwater. Every living thing depended on finding enough food to survive. Some animals ate plants or tiny floating life, while others hunted other animals. This created food chains that became more detailed as more species appeared. Sharks slowly found an important place among these hunters. One reason sharks survived for such a long time was their ability to change over many generations. Their bodies continued to develop features that helped them live in different environments. Some species lived close to the sea floor, while others stayed in open water. Some hunted during the day, while others searched for food at night. Different feeding habits allowed many kinds of sharks to exist at the same time without relying on exactly the same food. The skin of sharks also became one of their important features. Instead of smooth skin like many fish, sharks developed tiny tooth-like scales that covered their bodies. These scales helped protect them from injury. They also helped water move smoothly across their bodies while swimming. This made movement more efficient and helped sharks travel long distances without using unnecessary energy. Their senses became highly developed as millions of years passed. Good eyesight helped many sharks find prey in clear water. A strong sense of smell allowed them to detect food from far away. Special organs along their bodies sensed movement in the surrounding water. These organs helped sharks notice nearby animals even when they could not see them clearly. Another special sense allowed them to detect weak electrical signals produced by living animals. This gave sharks another way to locate prey hidden beneath sand or swimming in dark water. Teeth became one of the greatest strengths of sharks. Unlike many animals that have only one set of adult teeth, sharks developed rows of replacement teeth. When one tooth became damaged or fell out, another moved forward to replace it. This process continued throughout much of a shark's life. Since hunting often damaged teeth, this ability allowed sharks to continue feeding without long periods of difficulty. Different kinds of teeth appeared in different shark species. Some developed long pointed teeth that were useful for gripping slippery fish. Others developed wide teeth with sharp edges that helped cut through flesh. Some species had flat crushing teeth that allowed them to feed on shell-covered animals. These different tooth shapes reflected the different kinds of food available in the oceans. As sharks continued to spread into different environments, they encountered many challenges. Changes in sea level sometimes reduced the areas where they could live. Climate changes affected water temperature. Large volcanic eruptions sometimes changed conditions in the oceans. Asteroid impacts caused major environmental changes that affected many forms of life. Through these difficult periods, many shark species disappeared, but others survived and continued evolving. Many early fish were covered with thick plates that protected them from attack. These armored fish were among the largest animals living in ancient seas. Some reached impressive sizes and became successful predators themselves. They hunted smaller fish and many other marine animals. Sharks had to compete with these armored hunters for food and space. Over many generations, sharks continued developing faster swimming abilities and better hunting skills. One famous armored predator was a giant fish with an extremely powerful bite. It ruled many ancient seas for a long period. Although it was not a shark, it occupied an important place among prehistoric ocean hunters. It showed that powerful predators evolved in different animal groups. Eventually, this armored fish disappeared, while sharks continued surviving and producing many new species. As the armored fish became less common, sharks expanded into many habitats. Some species became larger than their ancestors. Others remained small and specialized in feeding on tiny animals. The oceans contained many opportunities, and sharks developed many different lifestyles. This variety helped increase the number of shark species living around the world. Reproduction also played an important part in shark evolution. Different shark species developed different ways of producing young. Some laid eggs protected by tough outer cases. These egg cases helped protect developing young from many dangers. Other sharks gave birth to live young. In these species, the young developed inside the mother's body before entering the water. Both methods helped sharks survive under different environmental conditions. Young sharks often faced many dangers immediately after birth or after leaving their eggs. Larger fish, marine reptiles, and even bigger sharks sometimes hunted them. Because of these dangers, young sharks had to grow quickly and learn how to find food while avoiding predators. Those that survived passed their successful traits to future generations. As millions of years passed, Earth's continents slowly changed position. Oceans opened and closed, new coastlines formed while others disappeared beneath rising seas. These changes created new habitats where sharks could spread. Some species adapted to warm, shallow waters near the coast. Others lived in deeper parts of the ocean where sunlight barely reached. Some even entered rivers connected to the sea for part of their lives. The rise of marine reptiles brought new competition to the oceans. These reptiles included long-necked swimmers, powerful hunters with large heads, fast-moving predators, and giant animals that searched for fish and squid. Although these reptiles became successful hunters, sharks continued surviving alongside them. Some sharks hunted similar prey, while others focused on different food sources. The appearance of squid and other soft-bodied animals also influenced shark evolution. Squid became an important food source for many shark species. Fast swimming and quick reactions helped sharks catch these active animals. In return, squid developed ways to escape by moving rapidly through the water. This ongoing struggle influenced changes in both hunters and prey over many generations. Many sharks became excellent travelers. Some species moved across huge parts of the ocean while following food supplies or suitable water temperatures. These long journeys allowed sharks to spread into many different regions. Populations that became separated sometimes evolved into new species after long periods of isolation. The oceans continued changing throughout Earth's history. Coral reefs expanded in warm, shallow seas, creating homes for countless fish and other marine animals. Sharks found abundant food around these reefs. Smaller reef sharks hunted fish hiding among the coral, while larger sharks sometimes visited reef areas in search of bigger prey. Deep ocean environments presented different challenges. Sunlight could not reach the greatest depths. Water pressure became extremely high. Food was often scarce. Some sharks adapted to these conditions by developing slower movement, sensitive senses, and feeding habits suited to rare opportunities. Their bodies reflected the special demands of deep-water life. The appearance of early rays added another branch to the group that included sharks. Rays shared many features with sharks, including skeletons made mostly of cartilage. However, their bodies gradually developed different shapes suited for life near the seafloor. Some rays buried themselves beneath sand while waiting for prey to approach. Others searched the bottom for shellfish and small animals hidden beneath the sediment. The history of sharks also included many extinctions. Entire groups disappeared when environmental conditions changed beyond their ability to survive. Even successful species eventually vanished, while new ones evolved to replace them. This constant process shaped the long history of sharks across hundreds of millions of years. Other powerful predators also evolved during this long history. Large fish developed strong jaws and sharp teeth. Marine reptiles became important hunters in many oceans. Later, marine mammals entered the seas and eventually became skilled predators as well. Each group developed features that suited its own way of finding food. Predators influenced the behavior of countless other marine animals. Fish often gathered into large groups for protection. Many species developed camouflage that made them harder to notice. Others hid among rocks, coral, or sea plants. Some became active mainly at night. These survival methods appeared gradually through many generations as animals responded to the constant threat of being hunted. Sharks continued changing as new prey became available. Some specialized in feeding mainly on fish. Others preferred marine mammals, squid, or shell-covered animals. A few species eventually developed feeding methods that allowed them to consume tiny, floating organisms by filtering seawater. These sharks became some of the largest fish ever to live, even though they fed on very small creatures. Different body shapes reflected different hunting styles. Some sharks developed long, slender bodies suited for continuous swimming across open water. Others had shorter and wider bodies that allowed sudden bursts of speed. Tail shapes also changed according to the movements required for different environments and feeding habits. The brains of sharks became more developed over time. Their nervous systems allowed them to process information from several senses at once. This helped them respond quickly to movement, smell, sound, and electrical signals produced by nearby animals. These abilities improved hunting success and helped sharks avoid danger from even larger predators. Fossils provide much of what scientists know about shark evolution. Because cartilage rarely survives long after death, complete shark skeletons are uncommon. Teeth, however, are much harder and fossilize more easily. Since sharks continuously replace their teeth, ancient seas accumulated enormous numbers of discarded teeth. These fossils allow scientists to identify many extinct shark species and study how their teeth changed through time. The rocks containing shark fossils are found on many continents, including places that are now far from the sea. These discoveries show that Earth's surface has changed greatly over immense periods of time. Areas that were once covered by ancient oceans later became dry land as continents slowly shifted and sea levels changed. The ancient seas were once home to many large reptiles that lived long before humans appeared on Earth. These animals were not fish, even though they spent most or all of their lives in the water. They were reptiles that had ancestors living on land. Over many millions of years, their bodies slowly changed. As they adapted to life in the oceans, their legs became flippers, their bodies became smoother for swimming, and many developed long jaws filled with sharp teeth for catching prey. They breathed air with lungs, so they had to rise to the surface from time to time. They laid the foundation for one of the most remarkable periods in the history of life beneath the sea. Their presence shaped ancient marine ecosystems and affected the lives of countless other sea creatures. The rise of giant marine reptiles began after one of the greatest extinction events in Earth's history. During this difficult period, many kinds of living things disappeared from both land and sea. As the environment slowly recovered, new groups of animals began to spread into habitats that had become empty. Some reptiles that originally lived near rivers, lakes, and coastlines gradually entered the oceans. At first, these early marine reptiles were small and still depended partly on land. Generation after generation, natural changes that made life in the sea easier were passed on to their young. Their bodies slowly became better suited for swimming, diving, hunting, and surviving in deep water. The oceans of that time offered a great supply of food. Many kinds of fish, shellfish, squid-like animals, ammonites, and other marine creatures lived in large numbers. This rich food supply allowed marine reptiles to grow larger over time. Different groups developed different hunting methods and body shapes. Some became fast swimmers that chased fish through open water. Others waited for prey to pass before attacking. Some searched along the seafloor for animals hidden in the mud or among rocks. Each group occupied its own place in the ancient seas. One of the earliest successful groups of marine reptiles was the ichthyosaurs. These reptiles appeared during the early part of the Triassic period, which began about 252 million years ago. Their ancestors were land reptiles that slowly adapted to life in the sea. Fossils show that early ichthyosaurs looked quite different from the later forms. Over time, their bodies became more streamlined, their tails became stronger, and their flippers became more effective for swimming. Ichthyosaurs came in many sizes. Some were only a few feet long, while others reached lengths of more than 60 feet. Their long jaws held many pointed teeth that helped them catch slippery prey. Their large eyes allowed them to see well even in deep or dim water. Some species had the largest eyes ever known among vertebrate animals. These large eyes helped them search for food during the night or in the darker parts of the ocean. Scientists have found fossils showing that ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young instead of laying eggs on land. This was an important change because it allowed them to spend their entire lives in the water. Fossils of mothers with unborn babies inside their bodies have provided direct evidence of this form of reproduction. The babies were born tail first, reducing the risk of drowning during birth. This adaptation helped young ichthyosaurs survive from the moment they entered the water. Ichthyosaurs mainly fed on fish, squid-like animals called belemnites and ammonites. Their sharp teeth allowed them to grab prey quickly. Some species had stronger teeth for catching larger animals, while others had smaller teeth suited for softer prey. Their hunting success depended on speed, sharp eyesight, and quick movements through the water. Another important group of marine reptiles was the plesiosaurs. These animals first appeared during the late part of the Triassic period and became widespread during the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Plesiosaurs had broad bodies, 4 strong flippers, short tails, and in many species, very long necks. Their heads were usually much smaller than their bodies. The long neck allowed them to move their heads in many directions while keeping the rest of the body steady. The long-necked plesiosaurs hunted fish, squid, and other small marine animals. They probably moved quietly through the water before quickly striking at nearby prey. Their many sharp teeth helped them hold struggling animals without letting them escape. Once captured, prey was swallowed whole because these reptiles could not chew food. Not all plesiosaurs had long necks. Some members of this group had much shorter necks and much larger heads. These animals are often called pliosaurs. Their massive skulls contained powerful jaw muscles and large teeth. Some teeth reached impressive lengths and were thick enough to crush flesh and grip large prey firmly. Pliosaurs hunted fish, other marine reptiles, and many kinds of sea animals. Their powerful bites made them successful predators in ancient oceans. One famous pliosaur was Liopleurodon. Fossils show that it was one of the large predators of the Jurassic seas. It had a broad head, thick neck, strong flippers, and powerful jaws. Its large teeth could seize struggling prey with great force. Although early television programs suggested enormous body sizes, later fossil studies indicate that most individuals were smaller than those dramatic estimates. Even so, Liopleurodon remained one of the major hunters of its time. Another giant pliosaur was Kronosaurus. This reptile lived during the Cretaceous period. It possessed an enormous skull, strong flippers, and a muscular body designed for active hunting. Fossil discoveries suggest that it fed on turtles, fish, ammonites, and other marine reptiles. Marks found on fossil bones provide clues about its feeding habits and the strength of its bite. Marine reptiles continued to diversify as millions of years passed. Some became specialists in certain types of prey, while others ate almost anything they could catch. Their success depended on healthy ocean ecosystems filled with many kinds of living creatures. Warm seas, rich coastal waters, and shallow inland seas supported enormous numbers of animals that formed the food supply for these giant reptiles. Sea turtles also appeared during ancient times. Early sea turtles retained some features of their land ancestors, but later forms became highly adapted for life in the ocean. Their front limbs developed into long flippers that provided efficient movement through the water. Their shells protected them from some predators while allowing them to travel great distances across the seas. Unlike most giant marine reptiles, sea turtles often return to land to lay their eggs. Female turtles climbed onto sandy beaches and dug nests where they buried their eggs. After covering the nests with sand, they returned to the sea. When the young turtles hatched, they crawled toward the water, facing many dangers along the way. Another remarkable group of marine reptiles was the mosasaurs. These reptiles appeared much later than ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. They became dominant during the Cretaceous period, beginning about 98 million years ago. Their ancestors were land-dwelling reptiles, closely related to modern monitor lizards and snakes. Over time, they became fully adapted to marine life. Mosasaurs had long bodies, powerful tails, paddle-like limbs, and flexible jaws. Their tails provided most of the force needed for swimming. Their limbs acted mainly as steering devices. Different species occupied different habitats. Some remained close to shore while others ventured into the open ocean. The jaws of mosasaurs contained several rows of teeth, including additional teeth on the roof of the mouth. These extra teeth helped hold struggling prey securely. Once prey entered the mouth, escape became extremely difficult. Mosasaurs fed on fish, ammonites, seabirds, turtles, sharks, and even other mosasaurs. Fossil evidence has revealed bite marks and stomach contents that support these feeding habits. One of the largest mosasaurs was Mosasaurus itself. It reached impressive lengths and became one of the top predators of the late Cretaceous seas. Its skull measured several feet long and contained many sharp teeth. Strong neck muscles and powerful jaws allowed it to seize large prey effectively. Fossils found in many parts of the world show that Mosasaurus spread across wide areas of ancient oceans. Another well-known mosasaur was Tylosaurus. It possessed a long snout without teeth at the very tip, giving its head a distinctive appearance. Scientists think this feature may have helped during hunting or interactions with other members of its species. Tylosaurus fed on a wide variety of marine animals, making it one of the most successful predators of its environment. Many marine reptiles developed excellent senses that helped them survive. Good eyesight allowed them to locate prey over long distances. Sensitive hearing may have helped detect movement through the water. Some scientists believe certain species could sense changes in water pressure, allowing them to detect nearby animals even when visibility was poor. Strong senses increased hunting success and reduced the chances of becoming prey themselves. The oceans these reptiles inhabited were very different from those of today. Sea levels often changed over long periods because of movements within Earth's crust and changes in climate. Shallow inland seas covered parts of continents, creating rich habitats filled with marine life. Coral reefs, underwater plains, rocky coastlines, and deep ocean waters each supported different communities of animals. Giant marine reptiles occupied many of these environments, depending on their size, hunting style, and food preferences. The age of dinosaurs was not only a time when giant animals walked across the land, it was also a period when the seas were full of life. The oceans covered a large part of the Earth, and they supported an amazing collection of marine animals. Many of these creatures were very different from those living in the oceans today. Some were huge reptiles that breathed air but spent almost all their lives in the water. Others were fish, with many shapes and sizes. Sharks continued to grow and spread into different environments. Shellfish, squid relatives, sea lilies, corals, and countless tiny animals filled every part of the marine world. Together, they created busy underwater ecosystems where every living thing played a role in keeping the oceans alive. During the age of dinosaurs, the continents were slowly moving across the surface of the Earth. As the land changed its position, the shape of the oceans also changed. New seas appeared while older seas became smaller or disappeared. Warm, shallow seas spread across many parts of the world. Deep oceans separated large land masses. Different coastlines created many places where marine life could grow. Sandy shores, rocky beaches, coral reefs, muddy seafloors, and deep ocean basins all became homes for different animals. The climate during much of this time was warmer than today. Large areas near the oceans remained warm throughout the year. This allowed many kinds of marine animals to live in places that would now be too cold for them. Warm water also encouraged the growth of tiny organisms that floated near the surface. These tiny living things formed the beginning of many food chains. Small animals fed on them, larger animals ate the smaller ones, and giant predators hunted the biggest creatures. Tiny plankton floated through the oceans in enormous numbers. Some plankton were simple plants that used sunlight to make food. Others were tiny animals that drifted wherever the ocean currents carried them. Even though they were extremely small, they supported almost every larger animal in the sea. Fish, shellfish, and many other creatures depended directly or indirectly on these tiny forms of life. Without them, the rich underwater ecosystems of the dinosaur age could not have existed. Many kinds of algae also lived in the ancient seas. Some floated freely while others grew on rocks, reefs, and shallow sea floors. These simple plants produced food using sunlight and released oxygen into the water. They also provided shelter for tiny animals. Small fish often hid among thick patches of algae to avoid hungry predators. Coral reefs became some of the busiest places in the oceans. Ancient corals slowly built large rocky structures over many generations. These reefs created safe places for countless marine animals. Small fish swam between narrow openings. Crabs searched for food among the rocks. Shellfish attached themselves to hard surfaces. Sea stars moved slowly across the reef while searching for food. Many soft-bodied animals are also found shelter inside the many cracks and spaces. The reefs supported animals of many sizes. Some fed on tiny floating organisms. Others searched for worms hiding in the sand. Larger fish hunted smaller fish among the coral branches. Marine reptiles often visited reefs because they offered an easy place to find prey. The large number of living creatures made coral reefs some of the richest environments in the ancient oceans. Fish became one of the most successful groups of marine animals during the age of dinosaurs. They appeared in many shapes and sizes. Some were only as long as a person's hand. Others grew several times longer than an adult human. Different fish developed different body forms, depending on where they lived and what they ate. Fast swimmers usually had smooth bodies that moved easily through the water. Fish that lived near the sea floor often had flatter bodies. Some had large mouths for catching prey, while others had small mouths that were better for eating tiny animals. Many fish hunted insects that landed on the water, small crustaceans, worms, squid relatives, and other fish. Some species searched for food near reefs. Others lived in open water far from land. Schools of fish sometimes traveled together in very large groups. Swimming together helped reduce the chance that any single fish would be caught by a predator. Some fish developed sharp teeth for catching slippery prey. Others had strong crushing teeth that allowed them to break open hard shells. Fish with powerful jaws could eat shellfish, ammonites, and other animals protected by thick coverings. Some fish fed mainly on soft-bodied animals that were easier to swallow whole. Ray-finned fish became especially successful during this period. They spread into many different marine environments. Their fins allowed them to swim with great control and speed. Over time, they became one of the largest groups of fish in the oceans. Their success continued long after the age of dinosaurs ended, and many living fish today belong to this group. Sharks also remained important members of marine ecosystems. They had already existed for a very long time before dinosaurs appeared. During the dinosaur age, they continued to evolve into many forms. Some sharks hunted near the seafloor, while others spent most of their lives in open water. Different species specialized in catching different kinds of prey. Shark bodies were built for efficient swimming. Their skeletons were made mostly of cartilage instead of hard bone. This made their bodies lighter while still providing support. Their rough skin reduced resistance as they moved through the water. Strong muscles powered long periods of swimming. Most sharks had several rows of teeth. When one tooth broke or fell out, another quickly moved into its place. This allowed sharks to continue feeding even after losing many teeth. Their teeth came in many shapes. Long pointed teeth helped catch fish. Wider teeth could grip larger prey. Some sharks developed teeth suited for crushing shellfish. Excellent senses helped sharks survive. They could detect movement in the water from long distances. Their sense of smell allowed them to locate food even when they could not see it clearly. They could also detect weak electrical signals produced by the muscles of other animals. These abilities made them successful hunters in clear water and in darker environments. Not every shark hunted large animals. Many fed on smaller fish, squid relatives, shellfish, or animals living on the sea floor. Different species occupied different parts of the marine environment, reducing direct competition for the same food. Rays also lived in ancient seas. Their flat bodies allowed them to rest on sandy or muddy sea floors. Many searched beneath the sand for shellfish and worms. Their wide fins helped them move smoothly across the bottom. Some buried themselves almost completely while waiting for prey to come close. Squid relatives formed another important group of marine animals. Many belonged to the ammonites, which carried beautiful spiral shells. These shells came in many sizes and patterns. Some were smooth, while others had raised ridges or bumps. The living animal stayed mostly inside the shell, extending its arms when feeding or moving. Ammonites drifted or swam through different parts of the oceans. Some probably stayed near the surface, while others lived deeper below. They fed on small marine animals and became food for fish, sharks, and marine reptiles. Because ammonites were so common and widespread, they formed an important part of ancient food webs. The shells of ammonites protected them from some predators, but not all. Powerful jaws and strong teeth could still break through the shell. Fossils sometimes show bite marks left by hungry hunters. Many ammonite shells also contain signs of repair, showing that some animals survived attacks and continued living after their shells healed. Another group of squid relatives included belemnites. Unlike ammonites, they had an internal hard structure instead of a large outside shell. Their bodies looked more like modern squid. They had long arms with hooks that helped them catch prey. Fast swimming allowed them to chase fish and smaller animals through open water. Belemnites became one of the most common animals in many ancient seas. Huge numbers lived together in some regions. They served as food for fish, sharks, marine reptiles, and other hunters. Fossils of belemnites are found in many parts of the world, showing how successful they became. Many shellfish also thrived during the dinosaur age. Clams buried themselves beneath the sand while filtering tiny food particles from the water. Oysters attached themselves to rocks and reefs. Mussels lived together in large groups along coastlines. These animals cleaned the water by filtering large amounts of seawater each day. Snails appeared in many forms. Some grazed on algae growing over rocks. Others hunted smaller animals. Their shells provided protection against some predators. Different shell shapes reflected the different environments where they lived. Thick shells offered better protection, while lighter shells allowed easier movement. crabs, shrimp, and lobsters became increasingly common. These crustaceans searched for food across reefs, beaches, and muddy seafloors. Many were active at night, hiding during the day from larger predators. Strong claws helped them gather food, defend themselves, and dig burrows. Sea stars slowly moved across the ocean floor using hundreds of tiny tube feet. They fed on shellfish and other slow-moving animals. Some could force open the shells of clams by pulling steadily with their many arms. Once the shell opened slightly, the sea star could begin feeding. Sea urchins covered themselves with movable spines that helped protect them from predators. They grazed on algae and other plant material growing across rocks. Their feeding helped prevent algae from covering entire reefs, allowing many other marine animals to survive in healthy conditions. Sea cucumbers searched through sand and mud for tiny bits of food. As they fed, they swallowed sediment and removed useful organic material before leaving the cleaned sand behind. This constant activity helped recycle nutrients across the sea floor. Sea lilies remained attached to the bottom by long stalks in many shallow environments. Their feather-like arms reached into the water to capture tiny floating food. Some relatives eventually became free-moving animals that crawled across the sea floor instead of remaining attached. Sponges covered rocks and reefs in many places. Although they looked simple, they filtered enormous amounts of water every day. Tiny food particles became trapped inside their bodies, while clean water flowed back into the ocean. Many small marine animals lived inside or around sponges, finding protection from predators. Worms lived almost everywhere beneath the sea. Some dug deep tunnels into the mud, while others lived inside protective tubes. They fed on tiny organic material, algae, or even small animals. Their burrowing mixed the sediments and allowed oxygen-rich water to reach deeper layers beneath the sea floor. This activity supported many other forms of marine life. Tiny crustaceans filled the waters in countless numbers. Many drifted with the currents, while others actively swam in search of food. They became an essential food source for fish, squid relatives, and many other animals. Even the largest marine predators depended indirectly on these tiny creatures because they formed an important part of the food chain. Marine reptiles added even greater variety to the oceans. Although they breathed air and had to return to the surface regularly, they spent most of their lives swimming. Their bodies became well suited for life in water, and different groups occupied different habitats throughout the ancient seas. The rise of giant prehistoric whales, dolphins, and other marine mammals was one of the most important events in the long history of life in the oceans. These animals were mammals, which means they were very different from fish and reptiles, even though they lived in the sea. They breathed air with lungs, gave birth to live young, fed their babies with milk, and had warm bodies that helped them stay active in many kinds of water. Their story began on land, where the earliest ancestors of whales and dolphins walked on 4 legs. Over a very long time, these land mammals slowly changed as they spent more time in rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. Many generations passed, and their bodies slowly became better suited for life in the sea. These changes happened because animals with useful features survived and had young that inherited those features. As time passed, these early mammals became some of the largest and most successful animals that ever lived in the oceans. The world changed greatly after the extinction of the large marine reptiles that had ruled the seas during the age of dinosaurs. The oceans still contained many fish, sharks, shellfish, and other sea creatures, but there was room for new kinds of animals to spread into different environments. Mammals were already living on land, and some groups slowly began to spend more time near water. Rivers, swamps, lakes, and shallow coastal areas provided food that attracted these animals. Some hunted fish while others searched for shellfish and small water animals. Over many generations, their bodies slowly changed to make swimming easier and walking less important. Scientists have found many fossils that show the gradual changes from land mammals to fully aquatic whales. These fossils have been discovered in parts of Asia, Africa, Europe, and North America. The rocks that contain these fossils preserve bones that reveal how different body parts slowly changed over time. Legs became shorter, feet became shaped for swimming, tails became stronger, and the position of the nostrils slowly moved higher on the head. Each discovery has helped scientists understand how these animals changed during millions of years. One of the earliest known relatives of whales lived about 50 million years ago. This animal spent much of its time on land, but also entered rivers and shallow water to search for food. It still had strong legs that allowed it to walk, yet its ears already showed special features that later became common in whales. These early ear bones allowed better hearing underwater. This was an important change because sound travels very well through water, and hearing became one of the most useful senses for animals living in the sea. As more generations passed, later whale ancestors became more comfortable in water than on land. Their legs became better for paddling, and their bodies became longer and smoother. They could still move on land for short periods, but they depended more on water for finding food and escaping danger. Their bones show that their muscles became stronger for swimming, and their tails began to play a larger role in movement. Their front legs slowly changed into flippers that helped with steering and balance instead of walking. The back legs became smaller over time. They were no longer needed for supporting the body's weight on land because these animals spent nearly all their lives in water. Eventually, the back legs became tiny bones hidden inside the body. Modern whales still have these small bones, although they no longer use them for walking. These hidden bones remind scientists of the long history of whale evolution. Another important change involved breathing. Land mammals breathe through nostrils located at the front of the face. As whale ancestors became fully aquatic, their nostrils slowly moved toward the top of the head. This change made it easier for the animals to breathe while swimming close to the surface. Instead of lifting the entire head above the water, they only needed to expose the blowhole. This saved energy and allowed them to spend more time swimming. Their eyes also changed. Vision underwater is different from vision on land because light behaves differently in water. Whale ancestors slowly developed eyes that worked well in aquatic conditions. Their hearing became even more advanced. Many whales communicate using sounds that travel long distances through the sea. These sounds help them stay together, find mates, care for young, and sometimes locate food. Early whales eventually spread into many oceans around the world. Warm seas, shallow coastlines, and rich feeding areas gave them many opportunities to survive. Some species remained relatively small while others grew much larger. Different food sources encouraged different feeding methods. Some whales hunted fish and squid. Others developed ways to filter tiny sea animals from the water. The earliest dolphins also developed from ancient whale ancestors. Dolphins belong to the whale family even though they are usually much smaller. Their ancestors slowly developed streamlined bodies, long jaws filled with many sharp teeth, and powerful tails that allowed fast swimming. Their intelligence also became one of their greatest strengths. Large brains helped them solve problems, cooperate in groups, and communicate using many different sounds. Many prehistoric dolphins were very different from living dolphins. Some had long narrow snouts filled with many teeth. Others had shorter faces and stronger jaws. Some species hunted close to shore, while others lived far out in the open ocean. Fossils show that dolphin diversity increased steadily as they adapted to different habitats. One of the greatest developments in whale evolution was the appearance of two major groups. One group kept sharp teeth throughout life and hunted fish, squid, and other marine animals. The other group gradually lost its teeth and developed baleen. Baleen consists of long plates made from the same material found in human fingernails and hair. These plates hang from the upper jaw and act as a filter. Baleen whales feed by taking huge amounts of seawater into their mouths. After closing the mouth, they push the water back out while keeping small sea animals trapped inside the baleen. This method allows them to eat enormous numbers of tiny creatures. Even though each animal they catch is very small, the total amount of food becomes enough to support very large bodies. The development of baleen opened new feeding opportunities. Areas filled with tiny sea animals became valuable feeding grounds. Cold ocean currents often brought nutrients toward the surface, allowing microscopic plants to grow. These tiny plants supported enormous populations of small animals such as krill. Baleen whales followed these rich feeding areas and gradually increased in size because large bodies could store more energy between feeding seasons. Some prehistoric baleen whales were much smaller than the largest living whales today. Their early forms still had small teeth along with simple baleen structures. Over many generations, the teeth disappeared completely in adults, leaving only baleen for feeding. Young whales still formed tiny teeth before birth, but these disappeared before they were born. Toothed whales followed a different path. Instead of filtering tiny animals, they remained active hunters. Many developed advanced sound systems that allowed them to locate prey even in dark water. They produced clicking sounds that bounced off nearby objects. The returning echoes gave information about distance, size, movement, and direction. This ability became extremely useful during hunting. Many dolphins developed excellent echolocation. This natural system allowed them to hunt fish hidden in cloudy water or during the night. They could also avoid underwater obstacles and stay close to members of their group. The development of echolocation greatly increased their success in many different marine environments. Prehistoric oceans contained many dangers. Large sharks, giant predatory whales, and other powerful hunters searched constantly for food. Young whales and dolphins faced especially high risks because they were smaller and less experienced. Mothers protected their calves carefully during the early months of life. The rich milk produced by whale mothers helped young animals grow quickly. Whale milk contains large amounts of fat, giving calves the energy needed for rapid growth in cold water. As whales became larger, pregnancy also became longer. Mothers invested great amounts of energy into raising a single calf. Unlike many fish that produce huge numbers of eggs, whales depended on careful care of relatively few young. This strategy helped improve survival because each calf received protection, milk, and guidance during its early life. Many prehistoric whales traveled long distances across the oceans. Seasonal movements allowed them to find food and suitable breeding areas. Fossil discoveries from different continents suggest that some whale groups spread widely through connected oceans. Ocean currents, water temperature, and food availability all influenced where different species lived. Changes in Earth's climate affected marine mammals throughout their history. Periods of warmer water changed the distribution of fish and other prey. Cooler periods created new feeding opportunities in different regions. As coastlines changed and sea levels rose or fell, marine mammals adjusted their migration routes and feeding habits. Species that adapted successfully continued to spread, while others slowly disappeared. Some prehistoric whales reached enormous sizes because their food sources remained abundant for long periods. Large bodies offered several advantages in open oceans. Thick layers of fat beneath the skin helped keep body heat from escaping into cold water. These fat stores also served as energy reserves during times when food became harder to find. Large muscles powered long-distance swimming, allowing whales to cross vast stretches of ocean. Many ancient marine mammals shared the oceans with seals, sea lions, early walruses, and sea cows, each developing its own way of finding food and surviving in different marine habitats. These groups also descended from land mammals, although they followed different evolutionary paths. Their fossils show many gradual changes that helped them become successful in aquatic environments. Megalodon was one of the largest sharks that ever lived in the history of the Earth. It lived in the oceans for millions of years and became one of the most successful hunters of its time. Scientists know about this giant shark mainly from its fossil teeth, pieces of its backbone, and the marks it left on the bones of other sea animals. Even though its body was made mostly of cartilage, which does not become fossils very often, the large number of teeth that have been discovered in many parts of the world has helped researchers learn a great deal about its size, its way of life, and the seas where it lived. The name Megalodon means big tooth. This name fits the animal because its teeth were much larger than those of living sharks. Some of these fossil teeth are longer than the hand of an adult person. They have thick roots and strong cutting edges that allowed the shark to bite deeply into the bodies of large sea animals. These teeth have been found on every continent except Antarctica, showing that Megalodon lived across many warm and mild oceans. The discovery of these teeth in different countries also shows that the shark was able to travel long distances while searching for food and suitable places to live. Megalodon first appeared during the Miocene epoch, about 23 million years ago. At that time, the Earth's climate was warmer than it is today in many places. Large parts of the oceans had rich supplies of food, and many kinds of marine mammals were becoming common. Whales, dolphins, seals, sea cows, and other ocean animals were spreading into different seas. This growing number of large animals created many feeding chances for Megalodon. The giant shark lived for millions of years and remained one of the leading predators in the oceans until it disappeared around 3,600,000 years ago during the Pliocene epoch. The oceans during the time of Megalodon were full of life. Many kinds of fish swam in schools across open waters. Sea turtles moved between feeding grounds and nesting areas. Different kinds of whales traveled through the oceans in search of food. Dolphins lived in groups and hunted smaller fish. Seals and sea lions gathered along coastlines before entering the water to feed. Squid and many other sea creatures filled different levels of the ocean. This rich environment provided Megalodon with many possible sources of food throughout its lifetime. Scientists believed that Megalodon spent much of its time in warm coastal waters because these places contained large numbers of marine animals. Coastal regions also offered safe nursery areas where young sharks could grow before moving into deeper water. Fossil discoveries suggest that these nursery areas existed in several parts of the world. Smaller Megalodon teeth have been found in places that were once shallow seas, showing that young sharks lived there while they were still growing. These shallow waters may have helped protect young sharks from other large predators while giving them enough food to support their rapid growth. A young Megalodon was already a very large animal when compared with many other sea creatures. Scientists believe that newborn pups may have measured several meters in length. This large size gave them an advantage from the beginning of life. Instead of feeding on tiny sea animals for a long period, they were already able to hunt fish, smaller sharks, and other medium-sized prey. As they continued growing, their food choices became larger and more varied. Megalodon continued growing for many years. Like living sharks, it probably replaced its teeth throughout its life. When one tooth became damaged or fell out, another tooth moved forward to take its place. This natural process allowed the shark to keep a full set of sharp teeth that could handle powerful bites. Since sharks lose many teeth during their lives, the ocean floor where Megalodon lived slowly became covered with thousands of teeth. Over millions of years, many of these teeth became fossils that were later buried beneath layers of sand and rock. The teeth of Megalodon reveal important details about its feeding habits. Their thick shape and sharp edges allowed them to cut through flesh, break bones, and hold struggling prey. Scientists have found bite marks on the fossil bones of whales that closely match the shape and size of Megalodon teeth. These marks show that the shark attacked large marine mammals. Some bite marks appear on the ribs, shoulders, and tailbones of whales, suggesting that the shark targeted different parts of the body during an attack. The bite force of Megalodon was extremely powerful. Computer studies based on fossil evidence suggest that it produced one of the strongest bites ever measured for any known animal. This powerful bite allowed the shark to crush bones that many other predators could not break. Strong jaws also helped the shark hold onto large prey that struggled to escape. Once the prey was weakened, the shark could continue feeding until little remained. Scientists continue to study exactly how large Megalodon became. Different fossil discoveries and new research methods have improved these estimates over time. Many researchers believe that fully grown adults reach lengths of around 15 to 20 meters. Some studies suggest that certain individuals may have grown even larger. Estimates of body weight reach many tons, making Megalodon one of the heaviest sharks that ever existed. The body of Megalodon was built for strength and steady movement through the water. Although no complete skeleton has ever been found, scientists use fossil remains together with the bodies of living sharks to estimate its appearance. It likely had a thick body, a large head, wide jaws, powerful muscles, and a strong tail that helped move it through the ocean. Its fins probably helped it stay balanced while swimming and turning during hunting. The skin of Megalodon was likely covered with tiny tooth-like scales called dermal denticles. These small structures are found on living sharks and help reduce resistance while swimming. They also protect the skin from damage. Although the skin itself has not survived in the fossil record, scientists believe Megalodon had similar features because these structures are common among sharks. Megalodon probably relied on several senses while searching for food. Like living sharks, it likely had an excellent sense of smell. Blood and other chemical signals released into the water by injured animals could have traveled long distances, helping the shark locate possible prey. It also likely had good hearing and could detect low-frequency sounds produced by swimming whales and other large sea animals. Its eyes probably allowed it to see well in different lighting conditions. Vision would have been useful while following moving prey or avoiding obstacles in the water. The shark also likely possessed special organs that detected weak electrical signals produced by the muscles and nerves of living animals. These organs would have helped it find prey even when visibility was poor. The oceans during the Miocene and Pliocene contained many different whale species. Some whales were much smaller than the giant whales living today. Many of these smaller whales may have been easier for Megalodon to hunt. Scientists believe that whales formed an important part of its diet because fossil bones from several whale species contain bite marks that match Megalodon teeth. Sea cows may also have been hunted in some coastal regions. These slow-moving marine mammals often fed in shallow waters where large sharks could reach them. Seals and sea lions may have become food when opportunities appeared. Large fish, sea turtles and other sharks could also have been eaten depending on what was available in different parts of the ocean. The feeding behavior of Megalodon probably changed with age. Younger sharks may have focused on smaller prey that matched their body size and hunting ability. As they became larger, they gained enough strength to attack much bigger animals. This gradual change in diet allowed them to make use of different food sources throughout their lives. Scientists believe that Megalodon traveled widely across the world's oceans. Fossil teeth have been discovered in North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia. These discoveries show that the shark had a very wide range. Warm ocean currents may have helped connect different populations by providing paths through suitable waters. Seasonal movements of whales may have influenced where Megalodon traveled. Many whales moved between feeding and breeding grounds during the year. A predator that depended heavily on whales for food may have followed these movements across long distances. Such travel would have allowed Megalodon to remain close to areas where food was most plentiful. The climate during much of Megalodon's existence supported large populations of marine animals. Warm seas encouraged the growth of many different ocean ecosystems. Tiny floating organisms multiplied in sunlit waters. Small fish fed on these organisms. Larger fish fed on the smaller fish. Marine mammals fed on fish, squid, and other sea animals. Megalodon lived near the top of this food chain and depended on the health of the entire ocean community. Many fossil sites where Megalodon teeth have been found were once underwater, but are now located on land because of changes in sea level and the movement of the Earth's crust. Rivers, cliffs, beaches, mines, and deserts have all produced Megalodon fossils. Some fossil collectors search riverbeds after heavy rain, because flowing water can uncover buried teeth. Others discover them along coastlines, where waves slowly wash away softer rock layers and expose fossils that have remained hidden for millions of years. The color of Megalodon fossil teeth often depends on the minerals that entered them after burial. Some teeth appear black, while others are gray, brown, blue, or even reddish. These colors do not show the original color of the teeth when the shark was alive. They result from chemical changes that happened during fossilization over millions of years,